Yeah, Clumsy, talk to us a little bit about just getting Merlin into Smite 2. What's the process? I know
What's
you all
the
have
process?
a lot of new features and systems that you can work in with Unreal 5.
Yes,
The gameplay
absolutely.
ability system. Merlin has a lot of abilities. How
Merlin
does
has
that
a lot
work?
of abilities. That's absolutely one of the main functions, right? It's just that when we were getting the idea of Merlin, yeah, we're just gonna keep casting things. I love seeing all the different spell effects and everything. Roland's been working really hard, but yeah, obviously Merlin's a master magician. He's got a whole bunch of abilities. We didn't really want to go too crazy on that sense because every time that we port in a god, we have to think about what's being redeveloped from the beginning, not just the gameplay side of it, the effect side, the sound effect
Right.
side. There's so much that goes in to porting a god from Smite 1 to Smite 2. And that goes kind of to his plus ones and his features. So we wanted to make sure that when we brought Merlin in from Smite 1 to Smite 2, we didn't kind of... It's not that we didn't want to go crazy for the sake of crazy, but when you're bringing in a character that already has so much going on, it's almost an injustice to push that too far away.
Yeah.
Like, just a simple example, and something that people said externally and internally, I was like, wait, what if we did a fourth stance, right? Like, what would that mean for Merlin? And like,
God, a fourth stance.
right? Can we do that? Do we
Right.
want to do it? We have more buttons than ever now. But in the grand scheme of things, and that's actually one of the reasons why we went kind of lighter on some of the plus ones, especially for Merlin, is because he's already got a pretty cohesive kit that, in fact, for just taking that example, if you brought in a fourth stance, you'd actually be detracting from the other stances and abilities that are already there, and you're going to be diluting what his kit identity actually is. Like, for
Right.
example, each one of his stances right now has a gameplay purpose for being there. If you bring in a fourth one, is that going to just be better all the time? Is that going to be what is the new niche you're trying to fill? It's a fun idea, but it's not something that was really entertained for too long. So despite any of the technical or artistic challenges that might be there, we wanted to make sure that Merlin feels like Merlin going into Smite 2. I know a lot of people even wanted to change the passive and go a little bit crazier there, and we kind of did that, but in a different way.
Yeah.
So I guess, do you want to try to just talk about the plus one
Yeah,
features?
let's get into it.
Yeah, so the main plus one feature going from Smite 1 to Smite 2, well, you've got the different abilities changing based on stance, but the one thing that never really changed was his teleport, his flicker ability. So now, whenever Merlin uses his flicker, depending on what stance he's in, you're going to see one of those three effects.
Right.
So in Arcane, you're going to be healing a percentage of the recent damage you've taken recently. You're going to be see that update in the passive meter, so that's a new element there. In Fire, for a short duration, you're going to be applying the Radiate debuff, which is what we're going to talk about in a second, which is basically just that dot effect. And for Ice, your ability cooldowns are going to be reduced by a full 5 seconds when you're in that stance.
Ooh.
Maybe that's a little bit high, but we
That
want
seems like a lot.
It seems like a lot,
pretty good.
but at the same time, you're most likely going to be using that flicker offensively if you want to do that. So you're kind of
Right.
sacrificing the defense mechanism and going for the offense. While in Arcane, right, you're sacrificing anything else and you're just trying to go for a little bit more of that heal play. You don't want to do it too early, otherwise you're not going to be able to make use of the actual heal from the damage, right? It's a kind of a combat heal.
Right.
And then for the Fire, that's again a kind of more of an offensive one. You're kind of weaving that in the middle of your fight to keep that dot going from your Radiate.
Nice, sweet. Well, let's talk about the Arcane one first. Let's see if I can take a little bit of a damage here.
And
in the
as
tower
usual,
range.
it being Titan Talk, we want to make sure that we're let you guys know that there's still some things that are going to be temp. Not everything's going to be in a perfect state, but we're going to
You
keep
see
sharpening
that
that
heal
up.
right there after the flicker in Arcane stance.
Yes.
Nice.
And that will be affected by anti-heal. So if you are anti-healed and you see like 100, you're not going to get that full 100 amount. It just as usual, it's going to be affected by that anti-heal number.
Sleepiest Merlin? Is that a...
Sleepiest Merlin is the thing. I went to Sleepiest Anubis the other day and actually went pretty
nice.
crazy. Because I knew they had a lot of anti-heal. So otherwise, his abilities that work the same way that you'd expect them to work. He's got this ability 1 that marks the enemies while they're in it. They take the initial hit damage. Again, we're trying to smooth some stuff out, but for the most part, everything does work the way you'd expect there. And then his flicker is that main +1 feature. So if we go to the Fire stance, his Fire stance has a small +1 that I'm actually still building out as we speak right
Nice.
now, which effectively is that his Radiate does, which is his first ability in the Fire stance, does a burning dot.
Cool.
And the idea is that when the combined area of the Dragonfire, so that center area that usually reduces protections, also applies that Radiate dot,
Yeah.
as does his Flicker and his Elemental Mastery. So the idea is that you have this Fire stance is the dot stance. It was kind of there before, but now you're kind of playing on that a little bit more. So you can
Right.
see that 13 damage. Now if you apply the center area, you're going to see the protection shred. You can see the center Ymir specifically will take that ongoing Radiate burn damage. If you use your 3, so now you're in hands, you can see him like lit up not just with lightning, but also with some extra
Oh,
fire.
yeah, I see it, yeah.
And for the next 3 or 4 seconds, your in hands will actually apply that Radiate BO1 debuff too. And then finally his ulti, it goes in and out, expands and contracts based on whatever stance you're going to in. You'll see that will also apply that radiant debuff. So the idea is...
It's more of like a burning effect, which is what you would expect, I guess, from fire.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. It's very on theme. I like it.
Now, the number's obviously going to be lower because of it, right? It's not the same old BO1 damage, but you're going to be having it spread throughout the kit.
Right.
Or at least that stance of his kit.
All right, and now we are in ice stance, so if I use my abilities here...
Ice stance as simple as ever before.
I get my cooldown resets here.
Yes.
Pretty quick.
Yep, 5 seconds there. So you're basically, with even the tiniest bit of CDR, you're most likely getting a double Frostbolt.
Oh, yeah.
And just in general, in the stances, it's still pretty simple. Your 2 is applying that stacking slow, which plays off of the 1, which does bonus damage off of slows. Of course, it'll do bonus damage off of any slow, but your 2 is the one that facilitates it. Or your 4, technically, facilitates it the most.
Yeah, that double Frostbolt right after the flicker.
Yeah, it feels good.
And then if you get Mirrodin, then you can triple Frostbolt.
Yes, exactly. So Merlin kind of coming in with those 2 main +1 gameplay features, the flicker one being the most important one. And then, like we talked about, his passive is still his passive. I know there are a lot of people who kind of wanted to see that get the +1 feature, but I actually thought that the flicker almost deserved it more because it was just kind of that singular, simple ability that we could emphasize and play around with in unique ways that kind of ties into each one of the stances of his kit, while the passive itself, it's there to weave in your extra spells, your lightning stance in a way. It was never meant to be pushed too far into the forefront of his kit. That being said, it was something that I wanted to play around with, and we can talk about it for his aspect.
Yeah.
However,
Oh, jeez. Are you guys ready to get
are we going to talk
pretty
about
silly
it?
with it?
Okay,
Is
we're
there
gonna
anything
get
else to talk about on base Merlin? Or like...
Well, I want to give a shout out again to the tech teams and the art teams. Merlin's not a simple character.
For sure,
even when we're talking about his abilities, like each one kind of seems almost simple by themselves, but there's so much interconnectivity. There's so much work that had to be done just in the idea that he's switching between these different stances and the amounts of, like, for example, his basic attacks. Like if you just fire his projectiles, they're themed to the different stances. The hit effects are themed to the different stances. There's a lot of different, like even the outro and the intros of the ulti, because if you don't have any points put into it, you don't do the explosion fields, and then that needs to be themed to the different stances. There's a lot that goes in to the triple stance swapping that while we may have had a little bit of the tech before that from like Uller and even Aladdin Lamp and stuff like that, there's still even more that had to be built in for Merlin's.
And let's answer a couple of just questions about base Merlin before
absolutely.
we move on. What is the number below the elemental icons? That is how much you will heal when you flicker while in Arcane stance, which is the amount of damage, 30% of the amount of damage you've taken in the last 4 seconds. What other ones were there? Does the flicker cooldown in ice stance also reduce the cooldown on the ult 5 seconds?
Yes, it does.
It does. Okay.
It only just doesn't do itself. And yeah, I'll get back to that in a little bit too.
There's a question of I thought gods were not coming with aspects. So we are planning to put a Merlin aspect in this update, but the Merlin aspect will not be available on the first day of the update because we feel like when we do that, it is less exciting, and we'd rather add it either a few days later or in the second week of the update. We haven't decided exactly when yet, but we will be adding the Merlin aspect later in OB6.
Correct.
Oh, and I wanted to give a special shout out because even though someone mentioned in chat, I did recall and I didn't forget, it is actually Sinfo's birthday today, so I wanted to wish her happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Sinfo.
And well, we love Sin, but also because she's a massive Merlin fan. I know she's been always asking about when Merlin's going to be in the game. She even has a really awesome Merlin tattoo that I got one time, and so a super shout out there. So happy birthday to Sin.
Sweet. All right. Well, I'm gonna bring us
thank
back
you,
to
T-Dog.
Cams.